A voice for older people, a highly experienced broadcaster. Dame Joan Bakewell is both of those, as well as a debut novelist. I caught up with her earlier on today at the Borders Book Festival to find out a little bit more about her book, All the Nice Girls, and to get her impressions of life here in the Borders. You've only been in the Borders a couple of hours, but give us your first impressions on Melrose, and particularly Harmony House and the setting for the festival.
Well, this is an amazing setting, isn't it? You're so fortunate to have this wonderful place. I came by train from London and was driven over from Berwick through the most wonderful landscape. And of course, it was a clear morning with speckled clouds in a blue sky. So the sunlight was changing on the hills and the horizons were very distant. The sense of space was huge and the trees were loaded. It's wonderful countryside here. I understand it's good farming territory, and there were lots of sheep and cattle, and it looked really lush countryside. So the drive was a great pleasure. And then I arrived at Melrose. Now, I knew there was something called Melrose Abbey, but I had no idea what it looked like, and I didn't realise it would be so substantial and so impressive and so nicely located in that sort of lull in the middle of the town. So it's just wonderful here.
There's one thing that I often ask authors that come to take part in the Borders Book Festival is, do you get enough time? Do you feel you've enough time to experience the Borders? Because quite often you're driven in, you have an event, you're very much the centre of an event, and then you're away again, and you perhaps don't get quite as much time as you would like just to experience life here.
No, but you don't get much time on your first visit to the book festival. But what you learn is you learn enough to know that it's worth a return visit. And so in future, I'll know about Melrose, and if I'm driving here or there, or if I'm in Edinburgh or around, I'll know that it's worth a detour, and that I'd like to come and I'd like to know more about Scots life here and so on, so that I'm tempted now.
Now, was it Alistair Moffat that was in contact with you directly about this?
Alistair Moffat's an old colleague from the times when we were both making arts programmes in Edinburgh about the Edinburgh Festival. Alistair, of course, had a much broader remit for Scottish television, but I was a visitor from the south, reporting on the festival at all levels, and making films about it, and being part of it on some occasions. So, yes, we always greeted each other as old colleagues whenever the festival came round.
That's one thing I was going to ask you about. You're extremely passionate about the arts, and I would imagine when Alistair got in touch with you and told you, I bet he would sell the Borders Book Festival to you, as only Alistair can, incredibly enthusiastic about it, very much, as I described, in the heartbeat of the festival. Providing you had a schedule in your calendar to make it to the Borders, I guess you wouldn't have to think long.
Well, I mean, I knew that if Alistair got a finger in the pie, it would be a good pie, you know. And also, I didn't know about Melrose, and why not come and discover something new? I was pleased that at that time my book was just published, and All the Nice Girls it's called. It's a first-time novel, and I of course want to share my excitement about that, so that there was no chance of my refusing. I really felt, oh yes, I must get up there.
Now, if you forgive the pun, is this a new chapter in your life?
Well, it is rather. I mean, I do say to older people for whom I now have a certain responsibility, if there's anything left in your life that you want to do and you possibly could do it now, because time's running out. And I felt like that with myself. I felt I've always wanted to write a novel. I've always wanted to harbour the yearning to write a novel. And the time came when I had a bit of space, and I had a story, and I wanted to tell it. And that's been very thrilling. And to do it at my age, well, I left it a bit late, but it's doing well.
It's never too late to start, though. It's never too late at all. And it's interesting because you take the readers back to the Second World War. It's based around the Second World War, around at the time early 1940s.
Yes, it's set in March 1942 is when it begins, quite specifically. It's about a school. This was quite common across the country, that schools adopted merchant ships. A school would adopt a merchant ship, and the schoolgirls would write to the sailors, and the sailors would write back. And it was all, in a sense, part of the morale-boosting effort to win the war, which was very close to all our hearts. I was just such a schoolgirl, and we were completely, dedicatedly, passionately patriotic. which is a characteristic that's rather fallen away these days. People don't feel like that about the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War, but we certainly felt that about the war against Germany in 1939-45. And so I try to recapture the mood of that time and how morality has changed, loyalties have changed, and indeed behaviour has changed, because the story that emerges between the school and the ship was born of a sort of naivety, born of fear of living in the shadow of war and what might happen, and sort of surprised me as it opened up the different things that happened to people in the war.
So in a sense, a personal account then?
It's rooted, the background is rooted in my old school days, but the actual events are not autobiographical at all, no.
But again, I guess it shows that the personal side, that a child who perhaps wasn't experiencing the bloodiness of war firsthand still had, in a sense, the communication, the contact with somebody that was. And I guess that one-to-one contact, that relationship, that bonding would be something quite special.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I try to create in the reader's mind is what it is like to be a country at war. We don't know that, the younger generations don't. I was a child during the war and I do remember it. The story that I tell is really a reflection of the impact on war and on love, on people's sensibilities, people's need for love, people's sense of let's live fast now because we could be dead next week. The urgency, but also men going out into the Atlantic at tremendous risk to their lives, and their need for some tenderness in their lives, their need for some commitment in their lives. And all this spins together in a complex story which really doesn't get resolved until the very last page of the book.
And it's something, I guess, that was as poignant then as it is now. The vulnerability of individuals who are out there, either on a battleship or in the trenches, face-to-face combat almost, the vulnerability of young men out in a war, and people that trying to get their head around understanding what the war is all about as well. I mean, it's much a main story now and a key fact of life in the 21st century as it was when you set the
Yes, it is interesting, isn't it? People hark back to the Second World War. There's a great nostalgia for it. And I think that's because at that time, things were very black and white. There was no issue about that war. It had to be fought to defeat Hitler and fascism. Now, part of my book is set in 2003, which is the year we invaded Iraq. And the country wasn't united at all. In fact, I marched against the war in Iraq. When I was writing my story about the young sailors, my mind did go to the young squaddies who are out in Iraq and who are exposed. The politics have changed, but these young soldiers in this desert land on their tanks wearing their, sandy-coloured uniforms, I did feel for them, and they look so young, 18, 19, 20, that war is harsh wherever it's fought, and wherever it's fought, and for whatever reason, it's harsh on the young men.
Where does writing this book then sit in terms of your personal achievements? Because I think it's fair to say that you've certainly blazed a trail. You've had a fantastically successful career, but you've reached a point now where obviously this is something that you've been wanting to do, and you've the satisfaction of being able to sit here and talk about a highly successful first book. We certainly hope that it will sell. I'm sure it will, many copies. But where does this sit in your overall success?
Well, it is a dream fulfilled, first of all, something I've always wanted to do, and it's taken me a long time to get round to it. So it set me on a track. I'm going to write another novel. The publishers wanted another. So in that sense, it's extended my working life. Also, in my role as the voice of older people, I like to think it's given encouragement to other people to keep going, to be creative in the years at the end of their life, to keep active, to remain alert and functioning. So the message is, for me, one of fulfilment, and for other people, one of encouragement.